Welcome to the Hedgeneer Podcast with your hosts, Michael Watson and Jhanvi.
And welcome back to the Hedgeneer Podcast. I'm your co-host, Michael Watson.
And I'm your other co-host, Jhanvi. So, Michael, what's new in AI this week?
So what is new?
I think we should start with OpenRouter because we were just talking about it and we got into a very interesting discussion about it. So let's just redo the conversation that we had 5 minutes ago.
For sure. So OpenRouter got acquired by Stripe for $7.5 billion. So people that aren't familiar, OpenRouter is a LLM proxy service where you can access both frontier models from US labs like ChatGPT or Anthropic, but you can also access models hosted on Hugging Face, open source models as well. So for somebody that's starting to transition from your off-the-shelf ChatGPT Enterprise or Anthropic Enterprise sources for inference, you're like, oh, let me try out some of these open source models, opposed to going to like a DeepSeek subscription or going to like a more bespoke NeoCloud. You can go to OpenRouter and proxy all of your inference through them, select your model at runtime, and they do some other interesting stuff as well. And Stripe put $7.5 billion into it. So that's, I think it's a pretty interesting investment. And I think that like the outcomes that they might see out of OpenRouter are going to be pretty fascinating in terms of like, well, what does OpenRouter turn into? And I think we're at the early stages.
Yeah, I've never used OpenRouter. I think you have. I think members of our team have, right? So you're saying you don't need a subscription to all of the various models that you route your request to. You just need an OpenRouter subscription?
Yeah, and then they can price the tokens for you through OpenRouter. And so like they can have a subscription with they can have a relationship with an underlying inference provider, and they can proxy your request to them, and then you pay through OpenRouter. It's kind of like a marketplace for inference. And I think that is the thesis that Stripe is playing into, where they see, so Stripe also gets to play inside baseball with inference. And so they can see the increase in spend by all of their customers for inference turning into almost a vertical line, where month over month, the single largest category of spend across, I would assume 99.5% of Stripe customers is in AI spend. And they see that at a very granular level. Mm-hmm. And they also likely see where that AI spend is going. So they'll see it going to ChatGPT. They'll see it going to Anthropic. And then they'll also start to see an inflection point likely where like, oh, there's this other category of spend within AI inference, and that might be going to OpenRouter. And so like that's people that have done a lot of work on the frontier labs, like, oh, there's all this interesting open source stuff. You hear us talking about on the podcast. How do I want to access that inference? And opposed to, like I said earlier, going to one of these like more bespoke inference providers, you go to what's essentially kind of becoming a bit of a marketplace and use OpenRouter to give you access to all of these other models. And they have a network effect. They have a lot of users that are defaulting to use OpenRouter. They have the hosted solution and also self-hosted as well. And part of it is an interesting thesis of like, can you see the marketplace ever becoming more valuable than the vendors within the marketplace? Like if the vendor is Anthropic and they're primarily just selling you high quality tokens, they'll still want to own that entire vertical where they sell you tokens direct, and they will then provide you those tokens as well. Like they want to own that storefront. ChatGPT will as well, but other vendors, they can say like, hey, I'll just sell through Walmart or I'll sell through Amazon, and I'll make sure that you have a great product. I'll market it relatively well. I'll make sure it's actually like very good. And then OpenRouter becomes more of a Costco or a Walmart or an Amazon, where it's your store for everything when it comes to inference. And they know, like, you know that you're going to get the best deal. They almost negotiate on your behalf for cheaper and better inference across these providers. And they act as like a market driver, allowing an efficient marketplace for the price of tokens, because they're kind of a middleman. And it gets a little bit into the conversation that we had with Kelly 2 or 3 episodes, it's maybe like 4 episodes now, where they can also provide some element of market making of tokens, where if they can find a way to be able to provide tokens at a cheaper price than what they might be selling for from like a vendor direct, they could actually like reroute mid request to tokens that they were able to themselves buy cheaper, hold very briefly, and sell them off to you, and be able to act a bit of a market maker, or at least enable that market maker operation to happen. So maybe they're just the trading venue. So in the scenario where you have like Anthropic at a $2 trillion, sorry, upcoming IPO, you have ChatGPT right behind them at, let's say, another $2 trillion. And then you have the entire open source world as well, starting to compete in that space. And then the future demand like is only increasing in that. Is it possible that if you're the marketplace that's providing all of that value, that's maybe the marketplace is potentially worth more than just $7.5 billion and closer to the 2 trillion number? And if I think the answer to that's a possibility, like in the bell curve of distributions, like that little blip at that end, like we become the marketplace for inference, is something that is like, that's an interesting type of outcome. And when you're Stripe and you see people spend look like that at inference for Anthropic and ChatGPT, and then like you see a little bit flat of OpenRouter, and then you see that at an inflection point, it's a really interesting time for them. And they're also really tied into finance teams. Like if like Arthur, who's our director of finance, he's now paying more attention to our spend when it comes to AI than any other spend category that we have across the firm, because it's
growing the most.
It's growing the most. Exactly. And so like if you're Stripe, you tend to have a lot of sophisticated, like maybe like AI forward customers as clients, and their finance teams are also asking you a lot about like, hey, like what do we do with this exploding expense category with AI? So they're hearing it from their customers as well. And they're saying like, oh, well, one of the things that you can do is you need really good observability into what your teams are doing with AI, be able to get analytics and to some extent cause better user behavior. But there's also things that a really good system can do in order to route to cheaper models and kind of do that arbitrage for you for tokens without having all of your users understand it. So having a really good token router might be a good way for you to manage your spend. And they might be getting those inbounds from some of like their larger accounts that see the spend category increasing. They're like, oh, well, if that's actually what we're going to be suggesting our customers to be doing to be able to better manage their spend, maybe we should acquire an asset that does exactly that right now before the possible like distribution of outcomes happens, where one of them is this OpenRouter like product explodes in valuation, and we're staring at it in the eye. We see the spend. We know exactly what the outcome is going to be. We need to buy this asset right now, because even if it's not accretive to our existing business, we see that this asset is going to be explosive in just its valuation over the long term. So even if it's not something that's accretive or complementary to the business, they just say like, oh, this is actually an incredible asset that we want to buy based off of how we see the overall business and spend of our clients. But there's also elements of like, it could fold into the existing business model really well, where if the majority of like financial and FP, or a significant portion of forward-looking FP&A for most of their customers in organizations involves your AI spend as a line item, and that starts getting broken down and more categorized and more analytics goes into AI spend just as a function of it's an increased portion of organizational expense categories, that having a expense management system integrated with a AI routing system, and you can get really detailed like relationships from like every dollar that goes out the door to AI. What was this project that it was used on? What was the prompt that invoked it? What was the agent that was invoked it? What was the model that was used? Is there anything we could have done to be able to reduce that spend internally and make that something that's integrated with like a Stripe analytic product? I think that it also makes, it's also accretive to their business model as well. So not only is it a great asset, I think it's also something that's very complementary to their overall business. And so I think it's actually a pretty awesome partnership.
You said a couple of things. One of the first things that you said that I want to respond to was what does this mean for the value prop of the marketplace versus the frontier models themselves? I think it's a function of the user profile. Like, I think that if you're a business that has an engineering team, the marketplace has a lot of value because you can start building product while inherently and automatically optimizing for the cost of AI tokens. But I think that if you're a smaller, let's say you're a hedge fund that has no engineering team, let's say you're like 20 people in a room, I don't think that at this point it makes sense to use an OpenRouter versus just going straight to Anthropic or ChatGPT, because they've built a product around the model. And so unless you have the resources or the patience or the time or the domain knowledge to actually build that product, why would you go straight to the router?
Yeah, like you need to also have the tools available that abstract away the concept of the router, such that you don't have a loss of productivity by using it. And so Claude Code, Cowork, Codex, those have the majority of mind share and like usability built in to drive AI adoption very effectively right now within the enterprise. And so because they've been able to vertically integrate both the value of inference as well as the product into one system, that losing that co-integration right now without having a really good alternative that you can easily roll out across the company, scale it, everyone knows how to use it. Claude has good training, ChatGPT has good training, everyone can go online. For the purposes of going to OpenRouter,
it's like the same, it's like Claude managed agents, right? Like you can build managed agents running on a server using Anthropic's Claude managed agent service, but none of our clients use it. All of our clients come to us to help them build agents because we have an agent offering that has a web app and a user interface, and it's curated for both technical and non-technical users in a way that Claude managed agents is not. You have to build code around it in order to actually get it working. I think this is the same thing.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Like so that you need UX and products that decouple the model from the just getting shit done in a tool that's intuitive, that's easily scalable, rolls out across the organization, and then where the inference happens, that can get kind of plugged in. And so you need like more enterprise products. Hedgeneer is one of them, and so we spend a lot of our time on that focus on the context and the data that you want to retain regardless of what model you're using, and ways that users can go and do their work today independent of what the underlying model is, in order to make it trivial to implement OpenRouter. Because the thing is, once you do that, like once you're not using Cowork or Code or Codex is your primary driver for everyday work, the underlying model provider you inherently need a router. Because even if you have all of your inference going through Anthropic and you're using another tool on a daily basis, you at least need something that looks like OpenRouter that is just routing to Anthropic. And once you have that like middle layer in, why not also allow to use open source when it makes sense if it's significantly cheaper, or allow yourself to use Anthropic or ChatGPT because there's no additional cost, because you're no longer tied into the actual pixels on the screen and the inference, because there's no inherent need for those two things to be coupled. You should be able to have separation of responsibilities between the tool and inference, and Stripe sees that. Like Stripe's able to see like, oh, I see the inflection that's happening with Anthropic, and I see ChatGPT. They are vertically integrated harness, UX, inference in one. But I also see like this fledgling, relatively speaking, in terms of spend, proxy service actually starting to capture a significant amount of the spend in my client base. If I assume that there's going to be a decoupling of the harness, the tool, and the inference, well, let me just go with where that marketplace for the inference is going to happen. And that's likely going to go to an OpenRouter. There is like LLM Lite. It's another open source version. They do have their enterprise option. You do get model proxy services from most of your hyperscalers. So like within Foundry, you'll be able to get something similar, same thing through AWS or GCP. And then there are other like specialty proxy services like runway.dev. That's what we talked about last week, where inference that happens over video, it's a different kind of like a transfer system when you're dealing with files of like an MP4. or a JPEG versus just text that's going back and forth. And so like the interface for dealing with like assets and videos and things you do in a creative environment are slightly different than when you get text completion, although the model and the framework and the transformers might be the same, but the UX is a little bit different. So there's still these opportunities for like specialty like proxy providers, but it's definitely like, if you believe in like the world of many models, which I think a lot of people do, like we already live in that world. It's not like you believe in a world that's like a theoretical one. We're already there now. Then going to the aggregator as like a somewhere that value gets accrued to, I think OpenRouter gets that. But then there's a question of like, oh, is there stickiness? Does it actually have network effects? If it's that hard to build, what's going to stop somebody else? If they start charging a VIG on the transaction, then somebody else is like, oh, we did the exact same thing. We just charge a lower VIG. Do they get opportunities of being able to buy in bulk? So if like it's like, hey, I'm going to pre-purchase $100 million of tokens from one of these neoclouds, but I want you to give me a 10 to 15% discount, then is there an advantage of being big in the space? Because they can commit to longer term contracts with token suppliers that allow them to negotiate price better than if you were to be an arbitrary middleman and you're just buying spot. And so there is an element of being big that gives you better negotiating power when you're dealing with token suppliers. And so that is an advantage of like being big right now versus trying to compete.
Yeah.
Is an up and comer.
But I think that on the flip side, I think that the same way that OpenRouter is a really strong aggregator, you could make the argument that a more universally compelling aggregator is one step above, which is like actual SaaS tools that people are using. Like if there was a router built into Slack, like Slack just came out with like the Slack code feature. And I think it's actually brilliant. I spent the last 3 days building an agent in Slack, and every single hour I have it scanning all of our major Slack channels and writing to a memory store that only I can see in GitHub. And this agent is able to assign tickets to the right people. It's able to prioritize tasks really well. It has all of the context just because Slack already has a very rich tapestry of context, because that is where we are discussing, that is where we are debating, that's where we're deciding, that's where we're like brainstorming. And so I think that the idea of saying, oh, code where you're already having these discussions, use this context to build a better software output, I think that's brilliant. And like, I think that if they were to build their own router, which I would imagine they could and will and should, you don't need to go through OpenRouter. Right? Like if Salesforce builds a router and then Microsoft builds a router and then Amazon builds a router, like how much market share are they capturing for all of the use cases of enterprise businesses? If those are the places where people are going and working anyways, you know?
But are they going to be able, I mean, Slack, yes. Is Slack going to be able to negotiate price per tokens like an OpenRouter would? I mean, probably.
Salesforce is huge.
Yeah.
So like,
No,
yes,
I definitely
yes.
agree. Like as inference moves to like, if you already have really good distribution, you don't need OpenRouter. Like Anthropic, or not Anthropic, but like Azure, they're model agnostic. They're going to build their own. They already have their own proxy tool. So like, they're not going to say like, oh, I'm going to route my request through
and like
OpenRouter.
You can use Claude. You can use non-Claude models in Claude code, right? We talked about this like, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they create an OpenRouter?
Well, because they monetize their tokens. Like they
right, but why not also monetize other people's tokens?
Well, because I don't think that like that's the long-term narrative of their business.
I think that they're still defining their long-term narrative of their business. They've raised so much capital, and these tokens are becoming commoditized as we speak, right? So like, where is their moat? What is their product? What is their edge? I think they're still figuring it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be in the premium quality of their of the tokens themselves, like the premium quality of their models to be able to produce higher quality tokens.
I don't think that's possible. Like with the way that open source models are catching up, and like at some point, this exponential growth that we're seeing in quality output, it has to start plateauing.
Possibly, but I mean, I don't know. I see Fable, and
I actually don't
Sol
like
5,
Fable.
6.
I think that Opus is better than Fable. Maybe it's the work that I'm doing. I'm not coding. I'm doing like more, I don't know, analytical work, brainstorming work, design work, like operations work. I don't like Fable.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I find it's verbose. I don't like if it's writing anything like that I want to send to somebody else.
It's very verbose. Yeah.
But I find it to be able to act or to be able to reason through abstract problems that I am less familiar with more effectively than any other like frontier model that I've used. I haven't used as much 5, 6 Sol, but I think that is I think that there is a premium that I think I'll always pay, I think, for Fable and be like comfortable paying for it. And I think that ultimately has to be where these model providers justify their moat. Like people will always pay for the smartest person in the room. Like you don't always need the smartest person in the room, but when you're
I don't think that's true though. Like I think that imagine a world where an open source model is in 1 year's time, an open source model will be as good as Fable, but it will cost 40% as much. Yes, Anthropic will have Fable too, and it's, I don't know, 40% better, 50% better, 60% better. But like there comes a point where the quality is good enough that the savings actually outweighs the quality.
I think it depends on the task. Yes, I think that that's a true statement for many things. But
yeah, like I will never in my life spend $100 on leggings. I think that's stupid. I think that the quality of $20 leggings, it fulfills my requirements for clothing, and therefore, even though the quality of the $100 pair is objectively better, I don't need that. And I think that models are the same way. Like if Opus 5 does all of the things that I need it to do really, really well, and I could get Opus 5 for 20% of the cost versus using Fable or using something better, I think I would use the cheaper version. Especially with the rise in AI costs that we're all experiencing right now. Like as a company, like there's no way to project it and how it's going to change over time. There's no precedent for it. Like experienced people that work in finance or work in operations are trying to figure this out in real time. Like I don't know.
But I think in a couple of situations where in the leggings scenario, you know what you're getting. You know what the distribution of outcomes are in leggings. Like in theory, yes, there maybe is an incredible pair that'll blow your mind, but the likelihood of that is very low. Therefore, why would you ever pay a premium when you already know what you're getting? And if you're doing a task where you already know what you want the outcome to be, you just need execution, why would you pay for a premium model that has more reasoning, but the reasoning is not going to fundamentally change the outcome beyond a certain threshold? But when you have, I think, questions or outcomes that don't have a known answer, like it's something fundamentally unknown, you're going into a space or a problem that you are unfamiliar with, and it's a high stakes problem, paying the premium for the reasoning in that situation, I think most people, if they have the resources for it, will spend money on it. And there still needs to be some element of a framework that you have so the model just doesn't go completely crazy. But like when dealing with the unknown and it's a high cost, high reward situation, I think you always pay for the premium tokens in that situation. Like,
okay, but in that world, how often of all of the tasks that an average employee in, I don't know, like a technology company or like a finance firm, whatever, average employee, how many of their tasks that they're working on and using AI for are actually high stakes, unknown unknowns? And two, at least for me, I feel like all of the greenfields work that I use AI for, the quality of the output is as much a function of the prompt that I put in and how I define the task, how I define how I am thinking about this problem, how I'm thinking about what a good solution means, how I'm thinking about the constraints that it should consider when I don't know, building out a new agent, or honestly, like rethinking our product management process or our operations around recruiting or whatever. My prompt, like a good prompt is what gets me a good answer, not Opus versus Fable.
I mean, I agree with that, but I would push back in that the higher, like as you're exploring possibilities and things that you don't have answers to, and you want some element of creativity and exploration with a model, I do find that Fable is better sometimes being an adversarial to like a certain hypothesis, or I find Fable going through like a new idea or a new process, something that's better than Opus, or going and discovering other ways that a problem might be implemented and allow it to do that exploration and come back. I trust, whether it's psychological or not, I trust Fable to go out and come up with suggestions to a problem that is open-ended better than I trust Opus. I still need to redirect it, but I find Fable is quite good if I construct it in the right way to go out with an open-ended problem and come back to me with solutions very consistently. But like, and you also got back to how much should employees be? How much should like a normal tech? How much should any person working today be responsible for solving open-ended problems without a known solution? And I think that should be the only thing that people should be spending a lot of their time, like that they should be spending their time on.
It should, but not is.
Correct. But I think that it will very quickly turn into should be. Like, I think it'll take some time. Like, I think it'll turn into it should be right now. I think it will be in a 2 to 3 year period where much of the work that people are doing is solving open-ended problems with AI, because the organization has realized the actual execution of the task with AI, maybe 1 or 2 years down the line, is something that can be done trivially. So the reason why you're here isn't to just do the trivial task. It's to solve the open-ended problem that we need you to use some element of judgment for. And then we have ways that we can monitor a lot of the work. And I think in those scenarios where people are all tasked with open-ended problems, having a premium model at their disposal as an organization, like as a leadership team, you feel like a sense of like, hey, they're solving hard problems. They're using models that are expensive, but like given the problem they're trying to solve is justified, the cost relative to the ROI of what that problem, if it's solved correctly, would mean for our organization, and making sure that you're able to have people that are working on the most important problems and knowing, hey, if they can solve that problem effectively, that would be very value accretive, or that would accrue a lot of value to the organization if they can solve that. Therefore, I'm okay with them using the most expensive model to solve it. But if you see what people are working on, and you can put some element of value if they're able to solve that problem for the organization, and it's not something that is value like significant, it doesn't move the needle significantly, like, hey, there's like, don't use the premium model for that problem. But I would say over the long term, if you have a lot of people using low quality models and still being effective in what they're doing, I think that there should be a question of why is that person persisting in that role successfully.
I agree. I agree that is eventually where we will get to, where it's like companies are AI native to a level where every single person is working on high impact work, because everything that is medium to low impact has been delegated out to agents. Like, that's what you're describing. Yes, eventually we'll get there. But then there's this like really long middle step where those companies actually become that. Like, I used to work at a company that had 40,000 full-time employees. Like, there are not enough problems in the world, let alone one company, for every one of those 40,000 full-time employees to have a challenging greenfield problem to solve every day. Like it's just not possible, right?
Mhm.
How long would it take for that 40,000 person company to whittle down to a 4,000 person company? Like 15 to 20 years?
Sure, but or is
But
the
in that time, if Anthropic is only if Anthropic is only capturing the revenue of the hardest
Mhm.
problems to solve, how are they ever going to justify this insane valuation of $2 trillion?
sure, but I would say like, well, what if that organization could provide so much value that they actually are getting optimal return out of those 40,000 people? And so I think that opposes, like, I think their product fundamentally needs to evolve in offering far more value and services. Like, I love the idea of everyone being able to IPO, and small companies can go public. You can start raising money in very interesting ways. Like capital markets can get far more efficient with AI,
Mhm.
and financial services providers, like maybe your previous employer, could have thousands of M&A bankers, each one dealing with their own deals. And they're responsible more for the agents that are helping optimize those deals for potential acquirers, or be able to help market people that are like starting their own AI company or building their own agents and finding ways of efficient, like of finding other people that might want to acquire that company. And so I guess I would say, like, opposed to saying it like you can do far more with AI, so that 40,000 goes to 4,000. Is it possible that that 40,000 person company stays the same, if not grows, but like what they're actually producing increases by an order of magnitude? And I like to think like that latter is also kind of in the equation.
Yeah, I think so. I just think that is going to take so long.
Sure, but yeah, but I guess like it doesn't. It's still cool. Like that's like a possibility of an
Mhm.
outcome. Like, does that happen next year? Does it happen the following year? Does it happen 3 years on? Like, but time goes so fast. Like 5 years is going to go by in the blink of an eye,
That's
and it's going to be 2030, and we're going to be looking back about like, oh, I feel like we were just on a podcast, season 3 or whatever season we're on right now, talking about this yesterday. It's like, yeah, I guess it was only 3 years ago, but yeah, it's 2030. Things have changed quite a bit. We're not fully there yet. 2035 comes along, 2040 comes along, and it's just going to happen. Like time just can go by so quickly. And whether or not like a lot of these changes happen over 2-year timeline or 10-year timeline, like grand scheme of things, it's about the same, I feel like, depending on like who you are, I guess. Like,
Is it though? Like if in the next 18 months, I don't know, people start, let's just say in 18 months, it becomes significantly cheaper to move to OpenRouter. It's significantly cheaper to start using open source models. I don't mean just in terms of token cost, but I'm
Mhm.
talking about like from a business and operations perspective, operators can be like, yeah, I can easily shift from Anthropic to
Yeah.
open source models. And it doesn't cost me a lot of time, energy, resources, and I also end up saving money every single month. Like, what does that happen to like the entire AI industry if like Anthropic and OpenAI, which in a lot of ways are these like giants that are holding a lot of this up, what if their revenue starts going down? Like, what does that mean?
The financial implications of that could definitely have some like temporary like issues. It was kind of interesting that NVIDIA, in that scenario, NVIDIA's kind of backstopped like different debt providers of data center build outs as well, if there is sort of like any drawdown. So like it is interesting to see like NVIDIA starting to guarantee some loans within the industry to prevent any, like, if there is like any like AI collapse or a bubble burst, that they're to some extent backstopping some of the debt providers of the build out. But I think that is going to be I don't think that changes anything.
You don't think that impacts the pace at which companies adopt AI?
No, I think they start adopting. If the cost of AI adoption drops by 10, if the cost of AI inference drops by 10x, you think that is going to slow down the pace
I think that will
of AI adoption?
I think that will slow down the pace for the like middle of the bell curve.
Yeah, I think yeah, the hype cycle might get deflated, but the cost of building AI functionality, like the cost of actually doing very, very hard things like agents running 24/7, 365, and having 1,000 of them running at the same time, if the cost of that goes down by 10x, I think that's significant. And I think that will actually, over the long term, drive AI adoption. It's like saying that, like, if the cost of oil were to drop by 10x, what would that do? It's like, oh, well, that would suck for like energy companies. And there's probably a lot of debt providers for energy companies. Like Saudi Arabia might be screwed, and the petrodollar might be like in shambles. But that doesn't mean that wouldn't be a net good thing for the broader economy to be able to have far cheaper sources of energy. So like, I think it would be like a temporary incident from a financial market perspective. And people would be like, oh, maybe oil isn't the next best thing, isn't the future, but like, hey, energy suddenly got super cheap. Look at all these things that I can do now that previously were hard, or at least they were expensive, but now
That's a good point. Yeah.
And for startups that are like, hey, like I'm dependent on a next round of financing in order to in order to like keep my runway going, and then you see multiples compress and the amount of liquidity available in the space, I think that would be detrimental for the ways in which a lot of this industry is financed. I think it'll also just be unfortunate because you'll see less money going into the space, but it's not like there's not a wild amount of money going into the AI space right now, even though there is a lot more I think like raising money within the AI world, people are getting smarter, asking more intelligent questions, especially on the software side of things, where cost of creation and asset development moats is lower than it ever has been. So it'll get even more challenging if there's a huge asset bubble that bursts when it comes to AI. But overall, like I think it'd be a great thing for the world and the economy to be able to have just cheaper inference in general, even if it does suck for like equity holders and people that are holding debt of AI companies right now, because like that's not good. But the people that are the consumers of them that still want to buy tokens, I think it'd be great. And that's like the majority of people that like you ultimately want to be successful is the ones that are buying the tokens and building great things, not just the ones that are selling them.
Yeah, 100%. I think this was a super fascinating conversation. And I think this is a pretty good time to call it.
So let's call it a wrap.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone for tuning again. I am your co-host, Michael Watson, and this is the one and only Jhanvi on the Hedge Engineer podcast. You can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Until the next episode, we will see you later.
The Hedge Engineer podcast releases episodes weekly on Tuesday. Our hosts are Michael Watson and Jhanvi. The Hedge Engineer podcast is produced and edited by Aaron Free. Follow us on your social platform of choice and reach out to us at podcast@hedgeengineer.io.